Do you believe Max Verstappen's future with Red Bull is completely sealed until 2028? Well, a new bombshell clause has been revealed by a respected Sky Sports journalist and is stirring up the Formula One scene. This clause, kept secret until now, opens a real and legal loophole for the three-time world champion to leave the Austrian team as early as the end of 2026. Yes, you heard right. Even with the longest contract in F1, Max could leave much earlier, and the reason is as simple as it is worrying. So stay until the end to not miss any details. Like and subscribe to the channel. We are talking about information revealed by none other than Craig Slater, reporter for Sky Sports, one of the most well-connected journalists in the F1 paddock. During a recent coverage for the British channel, Slater dropped a real bombshell. There is a new exit clause in Verstappen's contract that could allow him to leave Red Bull as early as the end of 2026. And the most striking thing? This information didn't come from rumor or speculation. It was announced on air, based on internal sources, from within the team itself. What seemed like a completely solid contract through 2028 now shows cracks. And those cracks may be deeper than anyone imagined. But let's take a step back and understand the origin of this clause. In 2022, Verstappen signed a contract 5-year extension, keeping him at Red Bull until the end of 2028. The goal? Stability. For both the driver and the team, which wanted to secure its rare gem for longer. However, over the past few months, the landscape within Red Bull has completely changed. The scandal involving Christian Horner, the imminent departure of Adrian Newey, and the uncertainty surrounding the competitiveness of Red Bull powertrain's new engines in partnership with Ford, all of this raised red flags for Verstappen. And that's where this new clause comes into play. According to Slater, there is a contractual loophole that gives Verstappen the right to leave Red Bull if the team's performance does not meet certain criteria from the 2026 season onwards. In other words, it's not a generic clause. It's a performance clause, and it's directly linked to the team's results in the championship. And why was this revelation so shocking? Because until then, we only knew about the clause linked to Helmut Marko. In early 2023, reports emerged that Verstappen would have the right to leave the team if Marko, his mentor and trusted figure within Red Bull, were fired. This clause was even mentioned publicly by Marko and Helmut Marko in interviews, and made it clear that Verstappen wanted to keep strategic allies close. But now, with the revelation of a second clause, and perhaps even more dangerous for Red Bull, the game changes completely. Because Marko can be replaced, but his performance is somewhat unpredictable. Even more so in a year like 2026, when the F1 regulations will be completely overhauled, with new aerodynamic rules and, most importantly, new engines. And that's where the danger lies for the Milton Keynes team. According to Craig Slater, this clause is based on Red Bull's performance during the season. Specifically, if Verstappen's car isn't competing in the top positions in the championship, the pilot would have the right to terminate the contract at the end of 2026, even if there are still 2 years left on the contract. The news was met with shock behind the scenes. Although Verstappen has never publicly stated that he wants to leave the team, he has made it clear in several interviews that he is not willing to stay in a car just to compete. He wants victories. He wants championships. And if Red Bull can't deliver, this clause could become a silent, legally sound, and extremely effective exit. Behind all the apparent stability and the smiles on the podium, there is a document with fine lines, conditional clauses, and loopholes very well thought out by both parties. Before I continue, please like and subscribe to the channel so that the YouTube algorithm recommends this video. And let's go. Max Verstappen signed his latest contract extension with Red Bull in early 2022, shortly after winning his first world title. This new contract made Verstappen the highest-paid driver in the team's history, with a salary that exceeds $50 million annually, in addition to bonuses for performance and victories. But the most striking detail was the duration of the agreement. The contract runs until the end of the 2028 season, which at the time represented the biggest commitment ever made between driver and team in the history of Formula One. A bold move, but one that reflected the level of mutual trust. Red Bull finally had the perfect driver, and Max had the dominant car. But Formula One isn't just about immediate results. It's built on long-term plans. And it's precisely in this context that Verstappen's contract reveals its most complex layers. Although officially valid until 2028, the agreement contains performance clauses which, in essence, allow the driver to leave the team before the deadline if certain conditions are not met. The best known, until then, was the famous Helmut Marko clause, mentioned in 2023, which would grant Verstappen the right to terminate his contract if Marko were to be fired from the Red Bull driver program. Marko, it's worth remembering, was one of the main people responsible for Max's launch into Formula One and has always served as his behind-the-scenes advisor. This clause, in fact, gained strength after the internal tensions involving Christian Horner and the recent changes in the team's leadership. But now in 2025, with the revelation of the performance clause, the scenario changes completely. Reliable sources confirm that the current contract was already being shaped with provisions that would allow the driver to leave if the team's performance fell below a certain competitive level. And here's an important detail. The 2025 clause is based on the league's position at the time of the summer break. If Max Verstappen is below fourth place in the Drivers' Championship, he can trigger the clause and open negotiations to leave the team at the end of the following season. In other words, what seemed like an unbreakable contract is actually conditioned on what matters most to Verstappen: competitiveness. And that's no coincidence. Verstappen has publicly stated that he doesn't want to be in Formula One for another decade just for the sake of being there. He wants to compete, fight for titles, and be part of a cutting-edge project. With the arrival of 2026 and the new technical regulations, which will completely change the car's engines and aerodynamics, Max's trust in Red Bull will be put to the test. And that's where the new performance clause for 2026, which according to the most recent information, requires that the car be among the two best on the grid, or at least that Max is directly competing for the championship. A little discussed but extremely relevant detail is that the clause also serves as a political weapon for Verstappen within the team. With this power in hand, he has direct influence over decisions regarding technical development, hiring engineers, team management, and even sponsorship agreements. Verstappen is not just the lead driver. He is the centerpiece of the entire Red Bull racing ecosystem. Verstappen's contract is, therefore, much more than a signed piece of paper with an end date. It is a representation of the power play within modern Formula One. Max currently sits third in the championship, with a margin of just 28 points over Russell, who is fourth. It may seem comfortable, but in Formula One, especially under the current points regulations, a bad race and an unexpected retirement can erase that advantage in a matter of a weekend. It's important to note that, contrary to popular belief, this clause doesn't require Red Bull's complete collapse to be triggered. It's enough that the team isn't consistently delivering a winning car. So far in 2025, Verstappen has won only 2 of the first 10 races, a modest number compared to his absolute dominance in 2023, when he won 19. Furthermore, he's been facing reliability issues, particularly with the new upgrade package introduced in Austria, which hasn't delivered the promised performance. These inconsistencies place Red Bull in a gray area, still competitive, but far from dominant. And this is precisely the worst-case scenario for keeping Verstappen fully engaged. The departure of Christian Horner, the face of Red Bull racing for nearly 2 decades, marked the beginning of a true transition of power within the team. While some friction was expected after years at the top and recent internal tensions, the decision took many by surprise, including some senior members. And now, with the arrival of Laurent Mekies, let's see if Red Bull will improve both the first and second cars. But tell me, what did you think of this video? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything.